Welcome in, friends and future friends, to this episode of the Sports and the World podcast. Hoping all of you are well and safe out there. Um, Before we get started, we're going to talk NFL, talk college football rankings came out, college basketball. But I want to lead off the show. As most of you know, uh, Cowboys defensive lineman Marshawn Kneeland left us at the age of 24. The parents' suicide with gunshot. And I want to read to you uh, the details of the case if you're not familiar with what happened. The initial incident began on November 5th around 10:33. That's when the Frisco police officers were called to assist the DPS, the Texas Department of Public Safety, in finding a vehicle that had eluded them during a high-speed pursuit. And the driver refused to stop, resulting in pursuit with DPS troopers, and then the troopers lost sight of the vehicle. The pursuit was ended. They also added that the vehicle was later found abandoned after being involved in a crash in southbound lanes of Dallas Parkway near Warren Park. Frisco police wrote in the statement that Nealon had expressed suicidal ideation or thoughts before the incident and was later found at 1:31 a.m. what appeared to be a self-inflicted gun wound, so an official cause of death has not been established. Meanwhile, TMZ obtained the police dispatch related to the audio connected to the incident, was Neal's girlfriend telling the dispatcher saying that he would end it all. Per TMZ, the dispatcher in the audio, she's saying he's armed and has a history of mental illness, and her quote was, "He will end it all." And the audio also states that the NFL called the Plano Police Department regarding an unnamed tabloid who was texting his family goodbye around the time of the incident. Um, it's a lot. It's a lot to look at. First and foremost, I think of his family. I think of his friends, all of those who love Marshawn. And far too often, we're seeing young men, and we've seen many cases of suicide. And it's a conversation that, especially amongst men, that I feel does not get talked about. And and in the moment I read it, my immediate thought, it the immediate thought I had was like I thought of his family. We never know what goes on inside the minds of people. And and simply put, it's okay not to be okay. And I think that has to be talked about. It's okay not to be okay. Because there's hundreds of thousands of men, myself included, and probably those who are listening and are watching right now. We've gone through, or we know someone dealing with some level of mental and depression. It affects it affects us because we're human. I remember my mom who passed away earlier this year. She had to remind me that I'm human, and it sounds so simple, but yet it's powerful because we try to be something that we're not alive. We try to be Superman. We try to be Superwoman. We try to be strong for others while trying to be strong for ourselves. And and now for for Marshawn's family, I'm thinking of them. Someone lost a son. Someone lost a sibling. His girlfriend lost her partner, and that's that's hard. And it's a reminder that You're not alone. There's help out there. And I always say, well, where did friends and future friends come from? Because I don't mean like like oh everybody's your like friends. You know, have a support. Find people like a circle. There's that love. You know, there's people out there that love you, whether you want to believe it or not. And we don't know what goes on in the lives. And I'm not going to dare speculate about Marshawn Kneeland's situation. All I know is that a young man, yes, he was a football player. Yes, he played for the Dallas Cowboys, but he was a human being. And we don't know what was going on with Marshawn Kneeland and how long he's been dealing with this mental illness. And so my words to you before we transition is to tell you this. If you ever feel that, you know, reach out to me on my social. Some of you have my number because you're not alone in this fight. You're not alone. It reminds me of one of my favorite songs. It was sung by the great opera singer Renee Fleming from, I believe, from Carousel. Like you'll never walk alone. You don't have to walk alone in this fight. You have people out there who love you. It was reminding me when I lost my mom back in August. And she reminded me many, many times that if you feel no one in this world loves you, she said, God and me love you. And I still hold on to that to this day, and I hold on to it for the rest. Just know that somebody out there loves you. I love you. And I hope you're doing well. And if you need help, get the help. Talk to someone. Talking can do wonders. And always remember, reach out, and somebody's hand will surely be there. And and thinking of that before we transition, it's once again I'll repeat it. It's okay not to be okay. And it's still hard to find the words, but I knew this was an important conversation to have because the numbers are too high. You belong to. You have purpose. Don't ever forget. And and now let's try to transition, take our breaths, and talk about the NFL. And week 9 was, like I say every week, week 9 was something. And what we learned in week 9, a certain team I felt got, you know, maybe kind of distanced themselves, and some teams kind of fell flat. And listen, what we saw from on Thursday night with Lamar Jackson. Uh, Lamar Jackson showed why he was an MVP. He showed how he's the like Reggie Jackson used to say back in the he's the straw that stirs the drink. And when you watch Baltimore, they look like a completely different team offensively. And that's how an MVP plays. We saw that level. We saw that MVP type play out of Josh Allen in the win over the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw Josh Allen just absolutely like we think of him like, oh man, he used his legs and he sat back in that 23 to 26, 273 and a touchdown pass. And he had 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. He had 3 total touchdowns for the game. Patrick Mahomes looked perplexed, completing under 50% of his passes, uh, sacked 3 times. Buffalo, we have to understand, good teams will always show up, and good teams are going to have down weeks. Listen, it's 17 games in the season. It's what I say about the NBA, any sport. Like you're going to have a rough patch. In the NFL, bad teams may have a couple of games, and they'll win some of those games, and they'll win some of those games. But good teams will dominate more often than not in some capacity. And in their bad games, when they play bad. But if they some games they play bad, they don't play that bad enough, but they still find a way to win. And I saw the Colts, and, and I don't care what league it is. You heard me talk about turnover, tempo, and time. The only category really this Colts won with time of possession. They had the ball for almost 32 minutes to Pittsburgh having the ball just around 28 minutes, a little over 28 minutes. And and listen, six turnovers, and Daniel Jones looked human. Three interceptions. He did throw for 342 yards. And Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce were kind of looking like Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison out there, each having 150 yards receiving apiece, and each targeted 10 plus times. Michael Pittman was targeted 12, Alec Pierce 13. And I still don't, it doesn't change my mind. I still think the Colts are a great football team. Like I said, it's one of those games. They had a very down game, they had a bad game. They'll be fine. It's not hit the panic button, and we'll talk about the trade deadline in a minute. And so when you keep looking around scanning, and like, listen, the Green Bay Packers, I believe in that game, and I think I said this. I said Carolina, they were 14-point dogs, underdogs in this match. I believe was the line. And Carolina is not a terrible team. I don't know what Carolina is. I think the job that Dave Canellis is doing, given with Bryce Young, this team is all about running the football. Rico Dowdle, 25 carries. Uh, in total, the team ran the ball over 30 times, and Bryce Young just slung it 20. And Bryce Young didn't have a touchdown. For Jordan Love, like 273 in the air, had an interception. If you find a reason, how did the team win the game this such close? Listen, two turnovers by Green Bay to Carolina's one. Green Bay had seven turnovers to Carolina's five. Green Bay had the ball slightly longer. They had more total yards. Did Green Bay? It felt close when you look at the stats, but when you watch it, it just feels like, yeah, it just felt like Carolina just wanted it a little bit more, and Green Bay just kind of came in flat. Do I think that it changes the perception? Once again, same. I'm not worried unless it becomes a consistency thing. Now, if I see them coming out there playing like that in the coming weeks, then it's time to be concerned. And so, like I said, you should, so like I said, if you're a fan of those teams, I personally wouldn't panic. If you're a fan of the Lions, I wouldn't panic about Detroit, but Minnesota, JJ McCarthy, the job that Kevin O'Connell does with quarterbacks. And it was a Carson Wentz, but he maximized even what Carson Wentz had. That's what great coaching does. So Kevin O'Connell, working with his guy JJ McCarthy, looks good, and and so something to keep in mind there. The Rams just the Rams looks very sneaky good, and Sean McVay, and that's a credit to Sean McVay. And I think the addition of Devontae Adams changed the way that offense would work. They have a great run game in Tyree. Matthew Stafford. You put with Puka Nakua, and then you have. It just feels like this team and that NFC West and the Seattle Seahawks. Sam Darnold, it felt like didn't miss a pass in that game. In fact, he only had three incompletions the whole game, three, and four touchdowns and an interception. And We talk about MVP. Listen, it fluctuates. It really does. From week to week, we had Daniel Jones. Remember, we had Daniel Jones, we had Baker, we had Justin Herbert. Like Sam Darnold's been playing consistent and doesn't get enough in the conversation, but I think he will. And so credit to Mike McDonald, and more specifically Clint Kubiak, who is going to be on the head coaching. He's going to be in a list for a lot of head coaching jobs openings that might arise up this season because of the job he's doing with Sam Darnold. And Seattle feels different. The Rams it feels like San Francisco. You can't count them out. Winning on the road against the Giants. Um, Listen, the NFL is always fun. A lot of parity, but it's always fun to watch. And so I think one of the things that has to come up in the conversation is we talk about who are the best teams. So we have to understand we're in the time of year now where listen, even the teams that we perceive as bad are still going to play us. It's why that Carolina Green Bay game wasn't all that surprising because Carolina is not terrible. Because Rico Dowdell not getting enough in the comp, the Carolina run game has been a huge asset, and it's like even bad teams can play good, can play well. Like Jacksonville, like the Raiders showed up, and literally they could have beat Jacksonville just one play. They're one play away from beating the Jacksonville Jaguars. Gino Argo had his best game of the season. Bad teams can play well later in the season. They might want to play spoiler. We're getting to that time of year where, like I said, good teams are separating themselves. And the fact of the matter is, and I'll stress this, if you're if your team right now is sitting atop the division, you're doing fine. You're doing great. So the fact of the matter is that nothing changes about Green Bay. Nothing changes about the Colts. I think Buffalo is starting to show Buffalo versus New England for the AFC East. If you had that circle, people had Buffalo running away with that division because you looked at it with Buffalo, been there, done that, established. Jets, Dolphins kind of playing to what people expected. New England, like, okay, Mike Vrabel's going to do some things, might win a couple of games, but now sitting atop the division. So there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good football teams, but the question is who are great football teams. And before we go any further, we have John Brooks in the chat saying what up there? What's going on, bud? What's up, John? You're well and safe. And my buddy Rachel, my bestie, hey, hey, how are you? By the way, I always keep saying it every time she pops up in this chat, I always say the work she does with Unwind in the fantasy football community. She is a huge asset to the fantasy football community. Bringing together all fantasy football time. I always feel honored and privileged when I go to these things, and I love going to them because of the people, the atmosphere, and the comfortability. And shout out to Rachel and who does absolutely amazing job in that regard. And I'll always and forever shout her out for that and the work that she does there because it's to be celebrated. And I'll keep saying it anytime, any mountaintop. I'll keep saying that. And staying in the NFL, the trade deadline came and passed. Um, the Colts are taking out of the Rams playbook. Curly Erston is like in that ownership in the ownership team there, like GM Chris Ballard, they're standing on business, getting Sauce Gardner and shipping off Adai Mitchell. Remember the guy who dropped the touchdown in the end? Yeah, he's with the Jets now. I'm not saying that's why. I'm not speculative, but you look at that receiver room: Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren. Like I don't want to use the word expendable in the NFL, but I'll let you guys are very smart. I'll let you guys put that together. And you look at Dallas, acquiring Quentin Williams and getting draft picks. and and the thing is, and Jerry made it clear that he made it clear the day before this, Dallas was going to make some moves, and he was a man of his word, and he said he was going to he's going to essentially rebuild this defense. That's the biggest flaw is with this defense, this Dallas defense, and of all the trades that were done, it's like Dallas getting Quinn Williams was a sign that, okay, that's just a bigger piece because remember they have two first round picks, they have their own, and the Packers picking from the Green Bay Packers deal, and so it's not all that surprising given that move. And listen, I don't know how Seattle got better. They got Rashid Shaheed from the Saints and gave up a fourth and a fifth next year's draft because the Saints they're in rebuild. This was a great trade on both sides got I think what they wanted. But I think Seattle hit it out the park. You're getting the guy, slot guy, and look at that receiver room. Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they already have Cooper Cup on the team. They got Tory Corden on this team. Like, if you're Clint Kubiak, you got to be a happy guy. Jacksonville getting Jacoby Myers. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say Brian Thomas Jr. Has been disappointing, but for Jacksonville to get another receiver tells me all I need to know. That who's the second best receiver on the team, and it's not picking at Jacksonville, but there's a reason why they made that deal. And the one trade, for Chicago and Cleveland, they made the trade with Joe Tryon, Shinoika. The Bears getting, some defensive help there. One team that I'm surprised about, and then, oh, by the way, Logan Wilson getting acquired from the Cincinnati Bengals by the Dallas Cowboys, acquiring him for a seventh round pick. I apologize. On the top of my head, I was like, try to figure it out. But I'm surprised that at the moves certain teams didn't make. And Cleveland, if you look at I thought with the emergence, as I talked about on RotoWire early season, with one of the best in the business with Jim Coventry, when I talked about the Browns and I talked about how good Harold Fanning Jr. is, and how he was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year, and they got him in the second round, and I'm like, that's doesn't look good for Njoku given the injury at the previous season. And somehow, I think, I don't know if Green Bay, given what happened with Tucker Kraft, I don't know if they tried to pursue. I feel like David Njoku's pretty high on that list. I would have felt maybe I don't know if the Falcons tried to move Kyle Pitts because I think the price tag maybe got higher given how he's played so far this season. Kyle is not the Pitts. My fantasy team, how are we doing? That's none of your business. I'll give you a clue up and down. But nonetheless, I'm surprised at the move. Like I said, that move, I'm surprised. Um, like there were reports that Brees Hall was going to be on the move to Kansas City, and the difference was the draft pick. I think it was different between Kansas City offered a fourth, and I think the Jets wanted a third. I don't know if that's true, but could you imagine how Brees Hall literally solved the one problem Kansas City has offensively? Was with the return of Rashee Rice and they have Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy. Can't forget about my guy Travis Kelsey. I'm not worried about the receiver position. It's like it feels like they're rocking with Kareem Hunt. Fine, because we thought Brashard Smith was going to be something. They have Isaiah Pacheco, but imagine getting Brees Hall and you give up a third. I'm not. I was in the room. I don't know. I was very shocked at who didn't get me, and that was one. The Cleveland. Like I said, I was really shocked because when Tucker Kraft went down, And I'm thinking, well, David Njoku to Green Bay makes a whole lot of sense. Have a veteran guy, a guy who can still get it, and and they said we're going to rock with Luke Musgrave, and that's cool. Like I say, I'm the move that were made were solid moves, but I was shocked at that particular move. But a move that I liked was listen. The Chargers are addressing the offensive line, getting Trevor Penning, only giving up a six-round pick in 2027. I think both sides it's even. I think the Saints nothing short of rebuilding, getting rid of Shaheed. I'm surprised Alvin Kamara wasn't moved. Chris Olave, you would have had to give up maybe a first, maybe a second, maybe there was something. I think that's someone who they feel they can build around offensively in terms of like the receiving core. So I understand maybe why they didn't make that move. But Trevor Penning gives some help. Joe Alt, great offensive lineman protects just Herbert's blind side. It was a good trade. I just think you had to find somebody. I think at that point, and and somehow the Eagles got better. Here's the thing: they gave up a 2026 third for Jalen Phillips. They gave the Miami Dolphins, uh, and then you're thinking, oh, that's all right. No, Philly got Jair Alexander and the 2027 seventh round pick, and all they gave Baltimore was the 2026 sixth round pick. And then I'm not done. Then they get Michael Carter the second from the New York Jets, and they trade, and essentially they got a 2027 seventh round pick, and the Jets get John Mechie and a sixth round pick in 2027. So the Jets kind of low key made a rebuilding, in the receiver, and John Mechie is not terrible. A healthy John Mechie, something we have to see. So, and then something that was, you know, the Steelers getting Kyle Duggar. That was like one of the earlier trades that was made. I really like that trade. I think given the defensive issues, the 49ers getting Keon White from the Eagles, excuse me, from the Patriots. Listen, the Rams getting Roger McCreary, the corner, and essentially just doing a corner swap with the Jags and the Browns. Greg Newsome goes to Jacksonville, Tyson Campbell goes to Cleveland, and they just swap the sixth round pick, and Cleveland gets the seventh round pick. And the Chargers, listen, defense getting Odafe Owa. You know, we know about the Joe Flacco trade. We know. Here's the thing. It's and here's the question, and this is a great question that Rachel has. Why is everyone injured? My theory is before I get back to my theory is that a part of me kind of feels I don't want to say conditioning and training because we've seen that, and I think that we've seen conditioning and training play a role, and I think more specifically is that we've seen this on the level, and we talk about injuries happen every year, but it's like this is the importance, like the preseason, like okay, we take away like the preseason was important, and the live action's important, but I think why everyone's getting injured, it's I can easily say, oh yeah, it's part of the game, but in reality, in totality, I really do believe it's that it's conditioning and the training. I really do. I think that plays a part of it, and especially it hurts in fantasy. It hurts in fantasy, and that's why a lot of teams' fantasy rosters look like injury list. It feels like a out or an IR. It feels like an injury. It feels like a hospital. It feels like a hospital on their roster because everybody. I think and to John's point to what I said, it's the conditioning and training. Like I said earlier, I just feel that it's I think it's conditioning and training, and I think losing the preseason games. And maybe that's why you see certain teams not play and that, certain players during preseason. Like some will just send them out, some will play a series or two, you get them out. Injuries happen. And but I think that's my core is just the conditioning and the training. To answer your question, great question, Rachel. If you have any other questions, drop them in the chat. I'll read them. And like I said, before we get and then I want to get back to the point about these trades. What you're seeing is that a lot of this happening because of injuries. And to Rachel's point is that, and that's why I said, and I'm not going to sit there and say that I'm shocked that Cleveland didn't do more because the fact of the matter is, like David Njoku, I felt would be a great asset for Green Bay. I really do. Like running back value, it's a hard position to trade. I think that there's certain positions that are harder to trade than others. I feel that running back is how you value the running back. The age is, come on, no, Rachel. But listen, that Beaver Moon probably has something to do with it. Listen, folks, when your Beaver Moon is out there, make sure sometimes if the Beaver Moon, if you can see the beaver and the Beaver Moon. If the Beaver Moon's kind of covered up and hiding a bit, you may have to, brush it back or kind of envision like it shines through. Maybe the Beaver Moon. We'll get some top people on, and John talks about and is I can't believe the Falcons stood pat. You know what, John? I can believe we stood pat because of the fact that I think the movable pieces I think on the roster would have probably been at a I don't know, even defensively, we had like there was a piece you could move, but I felt like the emergence of of Tyler Algier, and 'cause I was going to say Zach Harrison, but I don't think they were going to move. But and I think Kyle Pitts would have been great trade options, but like I say, with the running back position, it's very very hard to trade for because not just because of the age, because you can apply it to any other position, but I think specifically the value, the age of what they can bring. So I truly do believe that. I think, like I said, it wouldn't shock me that Kansas City reached out because it said maybe Kansas City's like maybe he's worth a fourth, and the Jets said he's worth a third. Those having a trade negotiation. You have here Howie Roseman getting two corners, improving the defense, giving help to the secondary like it's nothing, and essentially not giving up any, and then adding a great linebacker, solidly good young linebacker, Jalen Jones. It's about like these are the defending Super Bowl champions, and if they're out here making moves like that, you know what that's telling me? It's telling me that they want to get better. They said we got to get better defensively because we're going to face great offenses the rest of this season, and we're going to face some great offenses in the playoffs. So we got to have good corners. We got to have great stability at that linebacker core, and big fans. Good luck. And I think, and then now that you've seen the emerge, like Jalen Hurts showing that he could throw the football, which he always could do if you watched him at Alabama. I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to go down that road. Which you could clearly see down at Alabama, he could always throw the football. I don't know why the narrative. Like I'm not going to get into that. It's like the narrative. It was him, it was Lamar, like Josh Allen to an extent, but more so it was like the the Lamar Jacksons and the Jalen Hurts of the world. Like they can always throw the football if you watch them in college. It's what your offense asks you to do. And it's amazing when you get an offensive coordinator or you get an offense that you build around them. It's like they could always throw. It's just that they weren't asked to or didn't have to. So, so yeah. So like I say, the big one is like I think the Colts getting Sauce Gardner is a huge win once he's healthy. I think even Dallas to a degree is a winner because they went out and they tried to get up defensively and they still have draft picks. They got draft picks out of it. Because I really do think that they're really trying to rebuild that. They have to rebuild that defense. If Dallas had a top 15 defense, they would have probably won two of the they were two of the games that they lost. Or I could argue maybe that tie would have been a win against Green Bay. I can make that case if they had a defense. And if you're playing fantasy, if you're playing the Dallas Cowboys, it feels like wherever your quarterback is, wherever your receiver running back is, you know, you're gonna have a great day. But speaking of great days, college basketball is back. And and to me, I'll wrap up with college football, but I have to talk about, like I said, my UConn Huskies looking to repeat. And let me tell you something. Like I said, I watched the Miz, I watched my Gators play. Don't get me wrong. But I've been a UConn fan since forever. And and you look at women's college basketball, it's it's UConn, it's South Carolina, it's UCLA. You got Texas and LSU in the top five. And right there on the outside, kind of looking in, Duke and Tennessee both losing in their season opener. They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. We're not going to like, oh no, they're going to be fine. And I think when I look at Connecticut, I look at South Carolina, they produced a lot of talent, especially UConn. Like I say, I'll talk about more and more as the season goes along, but it shows you like UCLA needs to be in this conversation. Corey Close and the job she's doing out there at Westwood, it's like Lauren Betts, maybe first overall pick, maybe. But you got Gabriella Jaquez, Kiki Rice, Angela Julep. Ah, there's talent on this roster, specifically in the backcourt, and and they're good. But like I said, in college basketball, we have one or two good players, whether it's men's or women's. You're gonna go a long way, especially being healthy. So I want to touch on that. And like I said, we'll talk about it more, but let's put a button on this show. Before we put a button on the show, like, listen, and subscribe to the podcast, and like, listen, and subscribe to every episode. What's in the World podcast? Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on social media, Twitter and TikTok at @Alex_Brown. Instagram, there's _Brown. And follow Facebook, follow the podcast Facebook page as well in that regard. Now, before we get it, let's talk about the college football playoff. And the first rankings came out. Not surprised, Ohio State, Indiana, 1 and 2. Even Texas A&M at 8. And I'm looking down, and you look at the top 10, and there's only one, two lost top 10 in the top, and that's Notre Dame at 6 and 2. I look, listen, I've always said with Notre Dame, if they played in a conference, if they played in a conference, I think they have the greatest advantage because they don't play in a conference, and they don't play in a conference championship. While, and I'm not saying, oh, Notre Dame had, like, for the 1 year I think they joined the ACC, I think the COVID year, and they did pretty good. But geographically speaking, it's always made sense for them to be in the Big Ten. But that's a whole, that may not happen for a while. Maybe my kids will see Notre Dame in a conference. And I'm looking down. Like, I really like Georgia Tech. If you look at the way Georgia Tech has played and the job Brent Key has done there, it has been nothing short of phenomenal. And it goes to show you that you look at the path in the ACC, and I'm not going to say that Georgia Tech has a clear path, I'm not going to sit here and say that. But when you look at their schedule, like you look at their lone loss of the season, it came against NC State. But now they're going in number 16, and they got Boston College, Pitt. The key, like, why do I mention those games? Because the final game of the season, because they're going to be on a bye this week, and then they got at Boston College and they go at home at Pitt. It's that Georgia game, that in-state rivalry game, and that's the game where it that has major college football playoff implications. And Georgia Tech can show up, but like I said, I'm not going to go too put the cart before the horse. But that's the game to circle because and the key for Georgia Tech is don't do what Florida State did against Virginia is overlooked because Florida State had to play, I believe, Miami, and they overlooked Virginia and on the road, and if Florida State took the loss, and that's the biggest concern I have is I don't want Georgia Tech to lose focus because it's easy. You look ahead, ah, Boston College State will probably double-digit favorites potentially because we got our big game this weekend. We're gonna play Georgia, and it's gonna be at home, and that's important, and that could make a huge difference in the landscape. And you look at the path, Miami a two loss. That this is interesting because Georgia Tech is just one ahead of Miami in the rankings, and of course, Georgia Tech and Miami didn't play each other this season, but where where the concern is not the concern is that listen, I'm okay with C team because if you go back and go look at who did listen, here's the thing: who you lose to matters just as much as who you beat to me. Because to me, I'm big on, and I talked about this nerdy thing. I talked about SRS and SOS. Now, that's the SRS is a simple rating system that essentially it figures in average point differential, strength of schedule, and in that particular category, Tennessee is 25th. Strength of schedule, they're 34th. And you look at the three games that Josh Heupel listen, and I'm a Gators guy, and we hung around against Georgia. So maybe the issue was coaching. I just want to slide that, and I'm gonna slide that down, just pull out. But anyway, Beaver move, whatever. Back to the point. If you look at the schedule, here's the three losses Tennessee had. They lost by 4 to Georgia, and they lost by 6 to Oklahoma, and they lost their biggest loss was 17 against Alabama. So you look at the rankings and you look at where's Georgia? Georgia is number 5. Oklahoma's number 12. Excuse me. And in Alabama, I already said Alabama. Alabama's number 4. Georgia's 5. Oklahoma's 12. So their losses are to the top 15 teams, top 12 teams in the college football playoff. That's why. That's why they're still hanging around. Because some committees will value wins, some will value strength of schedule. I'm the kind of guy I look at your SRS, your simple rating system, and look at your SOS, your strength of schedule. And people say, oh, Ohio State is like, listen, I could argue a couple of SEC teams maybe play softer schedules because you're going to play tougher games in your conference. So Like the ACC, if you're in the ACC or you're a Power Five school, you have to play powerhouse schools to have some credibility. Because that's why I say back in the this is what separates. This is why I say how like look at the BCS system. Now the BCS system was essentially all about right up this. It was about putting a lot of points. Remember when Miami was in the Big East and they were blowing out the bejesus out of Rutgers and Boston College. The system rewarded them. College football play, we have the human element involved, and it's going to be it's something to look at. And John talked about Texas A&M in Texas. Listen. I like Texas is starting to figure it out at the right time of the season, and that's a credit to Steve. I'll be the first to say that credit to Steve Sarkisian and his staff because it didn't look good. Like they won games, like yeah, they lost Ohio State, but Arch didn't look good, and all of a sudden now they're winning four straight. They beat Vanderbilt, number nine Vanderbilt at the time, then number nine Vanderbilt. They got and so in 2 weeks, listen, they're on a bye week. They're going to face Georgia in Georgia. You want to talk about big time game? The Texas A&M plays Texas the last week of the season, I believe, John, and you can still circle that game as well. And Texas has a chance to make the SEC championship. It's all like I say, Georgia. Listen, you look at Georgia has the run of the gamut. Georgia SRS is 10th. The strength of schedule is 20th. Because look who Georgia has faced and is going to face. You know how many ranked? Listen, their only loss was to Alabama by 3, and that's it. And they took listen. Yeah, they won close against Florida and they won close against Ole Miss, but they have Mississippi State this coming up week, followed by Texas at home. Georgia right now, like I say, Georgia's biggest games right now is Texas is going to be within the next four, basically the back end of this month. It's going to be Texas and that's going to be in Georgia and they're going to go to Georgia Tech and they're going to be in LA. So I'm not really surprised. And these college football playoff rankings, they're initial, but that's why Texas is 11th. People can talk about the SEC this and the SEC that. Strength of schedule. Listen, you look at just the top 10 teams. Ohio, out of the top 10 teams, who's in the SEC? Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss. 4. You look at the Big Ten, Ohio State, Indiana. That's it. Excuse me, and Oregon. I keep forgetting Oregon's in it. So the committee is telling you the SEC and the Big Ten are the two best conferences in college football, and they're telling you about what they're telling you about the ACC is that the best ACC team, the top of the tier ACC team in the country, and they showed love to the Big 12 with BYU and Texas Tech as well, by the way. But what are they showing you about the ACC? The highest ranked ACC team on here is Virginia at 14, followed by Louisville, followed by Georgia Tech, followed by Miami. They're showing you. I will tell you. People will show you better than they can tell you. And they're showing you how they value the SEC and the Big Ten. A 3-loss Tennessee team is in the top 25. So this committee they value wins, but they also want to say, well, who did you lose to? And literally, Tennessee lost to three of the top 12 teams in the ranking: Alabama, Georgia, and Oklahoma. They're showing you. They're showing you that concept. And then John is out. And John is saying it's going to be Georgia versus Bama when Texas knocks off Texas A&M. We'll see. We will see. And I love the fact that there's no division. And I think that's what makes it more fun. Because with the SEC, there used to be a time where the SEC West, like imagine if you like with Nick Saban, imagine LSU have a great year, but Alabama had a better year. So just straight up, just free for all. Because you look at it now, the top two teams are Texas A&M, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. They have 5 wins. This is why I say if Texas A&M, they went out to their final game of the season, that will have major implications in the SEC. Georgia has major implications. It's game changing situation, and I'm here for it all, and I'll be here for it. Speaking of being here for it, thank you all for being here for this episode of the Sports and the World podcast. Remember to like, listen, subscribe to this episode, every episode of the Sports and the World podcast. Good thing the thing is live week. Once again, follow me Twitter and TikTok at Leaders_Brown. Instagram there's _Brown. While on Facebook, I'm on Threads now, but there's _Brown there as well. Check out the content there. If you haven't seen the preview for the Thursday night football game against the Raiders and the Broncos in the AFC West matchup, check it out on all my social media platforms. Friends and future friends, remember, I'll keep this in mind before we go. Love yourself, be kind, and know that you are loved. And until we meet again, friends and future friends, I'm Ladarius. Be real, be you, be blessed, and be safe from all of us here from the Sports and the World podcast.